Hello, souls and demons, and welcome back to the portal. Today's story is Trail's End by getyaisha. It's a longer story, so go ahead and sit back, grip your seats, kick up your feet, and enjoy. My name is Sam, and I used to be a delivery driver. I won't say for who because I'll probably get sued, but I'm pretty sure everyone knows who they are. I had been on the job for close to 2 years, and in that time, I had seen some of the most amazing neighborhoods in the city. The problem started when I was slated to deliver to a gated community called Trail's End. The place was amazing, and if you didn't know any better, you would think it was a small town. My route for the day was pretty much the whole neighborhood, but one house specifically would change my life. House 72 had the biggest, heaviest boxes of my load, so I decided to go there first. From the start, I knew this assignment was going to be a problem. The neighborhood was located outside of the city, about 50 miles off the main highway. The private road leading up to the gates was pristine, smooth white concrete, leveled from start to finish. Huge trees lined the road on either side the entire way. My jaw dropped when I came to the main entrance of the neighborhood. The entire place is surrounded by a concrete wall. To give you an idea of how tall this wall is, the van I drove has a 9-foot clearance. The wall had to be close to twice that, so if I had to guess, I'd say at least 16 feet. The drive through the gates was your standard wrought iron electric setup. You punch in the key code, the gate opens, and you drive through. The first thing you see as you pass through the gates is a man-made lake. It sits in the middle of the park with slides and swings. There's even a pool. The place looks fantastic. Once you pass the park, I bullshit you not, there's a full-on gas station with one of those water towers behind it. As you head towards the houses on either side of the road are 2 huge fields of nothing but solar panels. The place is mind-blowing. When I finally did get to the houses, things got confusing. The place was massive. There were no street names, just house numbers, and forget about GPS. Not 1 inch of this place is mapped. That means you have to read the package and find the house. I drove all over the place and I couldn't find house 72, so I went on with the rest of my route and returned the packages. The very next day I get the same route and once again house 72. Things felt different this time. For some reason, it felt like everyone was watching me. I tried to shake it off and pulled into the gas station I'd seen the day before. The second I stepped out of the truck, a security car pulled up with its lights flashing. The car slowly rolled up to where I was standing and let the window down as it came to a stop. An older guy was behind the wheel, you know the type. Graying crew cut, sunglasses, and a disapproving scowl permanently stretched across his leathery face. He stared at me for a brief second before he took off his glasses, giving me the once-over before tossing out a friendly threat. I don't want to see you speeding around here like you did yesterday. Somebody might get hurt. So slow it down for me, okay, buddy? Now, normally I would have tossed out one of those good customer service lines, but there was something about the look on this guy's face. He had a slight smirk and a weird 1,000-yard stare. I swear it felt like he was looking through me instead of at me. It was unnerving. I don't think the guy blinked a single time he was talking to me, but by the end of the conversation, I agreed to slow down and asked him about house 72. He slipped his glasses back on as that weird smirk vanished from his face. Go to Street 23 and make a right. Go straight until the road ends and turn left onto a gravel road that will take you straight there. After that, he rolled up the window and drove off. His directions were perfect and I got there with no problem. What he neglected to tell me was the gravel road was 2-mile stretch through what looked like swampland. The road came to a clearing and there was house 72. It didn't look like any of the houses around it. This house was old but very well kept. I fully expected the creepy-ass movie mansion, but this place looked fairly nice. It was a huge 1-story flat made of some type of stone. Nothing really ominous about the place. The driveway was enormous. There was more than enough room for me to turn the truck around when I was done. I pulled up close to the house, stopped, scanned the ticket, then got out and went to the back to get the first of 3 heavy boxes. I had just set the first box down and was grabbing the next one when I hear a man's voice from behind me. "It's about time you got here. These are supposed to arrive yesterday." I put on my best fake smile and turned to face the clearly agitated customer. "Well, sir, the driver had a little trouble finding your house yesterday and the packages were returned to the station. But better late than never, right?" He wasn't amused by my attempt to lighten the mood. "Just leave them here. I'll have to take them in." After that, he just stood there watching until I finished up and drove away. I still had about 40 more stops to make around the neighborhood, so I brushed it off and went on with my day. The second I pulled up to my 10th stop, everything changed. There was someone standing in the doorway of every single house, watching me. I tried to get the job done, I really did, but after a few blocks, I wanted out. I pulled over and tried calling dispatch, but I couldn't get through. By this time, people are coming out of their homes, standing in their yards, staring at me. I put the phone down, put the truck in drive and headed for the main entrance, but when I got there, the gate wouldn't open. As soon as I stopped the truck, a rock came smashing through the passenger side window. I panicked, yanked the wheel hard left and hit the gas, running over the median in the process before speeding off back towards the houses. As I sped towards the first intersection, near the gas station, I see 2 kids running across the street dragging something. I didn't realize what it was until it was too late. It was a spike strip. When I hit it, my front tires blew out instantly, causing me to lose control of the truck and crash into a parked car. As soon as the truck stopped, I got out and fell flat on my face. Feeling disoriented and hurting from the wreck, I managed to get to my feet in time to see that security car racing up. The old man hopped out clutching a shotgun with a smile stretched across his face. "I told you someone was going to get hurt," he chuckled, as he brought the gun up and fired in my direction, hitting me square in the chest, knocking the wind out of me, sending me crashing back to the ground. "Damn, I love these beanbag rounds." He looked down at me smiling for a second before kicking me in the head, knocking me unconscious. I woke up strapped to a chair, sitting in the middle of what looked like a basement. I thrashed back and forward for a second, trying to get loose, but the thick leather straps just seemed to get tighter with every move I made. After a few minutes, I heard a door open somewhere behind me. The sound of hard-soled shoes clicking across the concrete floor froze me in place. A familiar voice spoke out. "You should have been on time." It took me a few seconds to recognize his voice. It was the old man from House 72. I thrashed around at him, yelling hysterically, "Fuck you, let me out of here! What's wrong with you people?" The old man slowly came around to face me, and the second we made eye contact, he punched me. His rock-like fist smashed into my face. I felt my cheekbone crack and my ear started ringing. He laughed and punched me again. The second shot was straight to the chin, knocking out 2 of my teeth. He chuckled and wiped his hand on my shirt. Things get a little fuzzy right here. The old man didn't say anything else to me, he just kept beating on me until I blacked out again. I came to on a gurney. I wasn't strapped down, but I couldn't move my body. It was numb. I was in a different room now. There was all kinds of equipment lining the walls. For a second, I thought I was in the hospital. There were 2 women wearing lab coats at the far end of the room. They hadn't noticed I was awake yet, so I stayed still until they left. Once I was sure they were gone, I tried to sit up. My head was throbbing and my entire body ached. Every movement was a struggle. When I was finally able to sit up, I slid off the gurney and tried to stand, crumbling straight to the floor, landing with a loud smack. I laid there still for a few seconds, waiting for someone to come rushing in. No one came. I started flopping around like a fish out of water. It would have been funny if it wasn't so completely fucked up. I flopped around on the floor for a while before finally getting to my feet and stumbling to the door. I stood there on wobbly legs, gripping the frame of the door. I couldn't think straight. My heart was pounding in my chest, a million thoughts racing through my head at once. I was drifting into a full-on panic mode. I had to get a grip on myself. I put my back to the wall and forced myself to stand up straight, then tilted my head back, closed my eyes and took the deepest breath I could, holding it in for a second, then slowly releasing it as I opened my eyes. The pain was still there, and it was still incredibly hard to move, but I was able to calm myself down enough to get focused on finding a way out of wherever the fuck this was. I wobbled out into the hallway to see the place was empty. I wandered from hall to hall, gripping the walls as whatever they gave me slowly wore off and I regained control of my body. After a few minutes, I was completely lost. I had no way of knowing where I was or how to find my way out. I wasn't stumbling around anymore, but my head was killing me. My right eye was swollen shut. My nose was broken and my jaw clicked when it moved. It felt like shit, but I was walking and it wasn't long before I was running. One hall led to another. They all looked the same after a while, but as I made a turn to another hallway, I slammed into a brick wall of a human being. This guy was huge, easily 7 feet tall. Now, I'm not a small man. I'm 6 foot, around 200 pounds, and in fairly good shape, but when I collided with this guy, he didn't budge. I literally bounced off of him, stumbled backwards and fell flat on my ass. When I glanced up at his face, I saw he was wearing an almost tribal-looking bird mask. What the F? Was all I was able to get out before he snatched me up off the ground and slammed me up against the wall, and quickly throwing 2 hard punches to my gut, nearly folding me in half. He grabbed me by the back of the neck and stood me up straight, then pushed me to the right and told me to walk. He guided me through a few more halls to a gigantic room filled with people wearing the bird masks and gray robes. The crowd parted as we walked in, revealing 2 other people strapped to chairs in the center of the room. A man and a woman. The woman was wearing a police uniform and the man was wearing blue coveralls with a name tag stitched onto it. And in front of them, a third chair. My chair. I froze in my tracks, only to be pushed from behind by the big guy. As I stumbled forward, someone from the crowd rushed up to me and jammed a needle in my neck, pushing the plunger down as they did. A warm wave washed over my body, my knees buckled as the room started spinning. 2 others rushed over from the crowd and guided me over to my seat, then strapped me in and stepped back with the others. A PA system crackled to life as the old man's voice boomed through the speaker. Blood of my blood, flesh of my flesh, tonight we ascend. The room went dark as the crowd started chanting. I couldn't understand a single word they were saying, but as the chanting got louder, the room started to vibrate with a low buzzing sound. A thunderous voice rolled through the air. Your sacrifice has been deemed worthy. The lights flickered back to life, and as they did, the room melted away, leaving all 3 of us hanging in the void, paralyzed by whatever drugs they had pumped into our systems. I could still hear the chanting, but it seemed so far away. It was just white noise now. A single pair of round, bright yellow eyes peered in at us from the darkness of the void as a putrid stench, the combination of rotted flesh and pine, saturated the air, making it hard to breathe. I looked over to the man in overalls, who was now thrashing against the straps, trying to get his body to move, when the creature made its first strike. When the cop saw it coming, she rocked so hard in her chair she fell over, landing flat on her back, letting out a scream as that thing came bounding our way, shaking the world with each step. It rushed into the light, a hulking beast of a thing. Its slick gray skin looked almost like scales. Its hands were more like talons. 4 fingers, each tipped with long, razor-sharp, solid black claws. The bulk of its body looked almost human, but its head, oh good lord, its head was a great horned owl. It let out an ear-piercing screech, then tore into the poor guy, shredding through his coveralls, then taking a huge bite, tearing away all the flesh between the man's neck and right shoulder. The bite nearly took his head completely off. It flopped to the side, only connected by a meaty flap of shredded flesh. The creature tilted its head back and choked down its first mouthful, before lunging at the lady cop in the next chair. It bit into her skull with a sickening wet crunch, while I sat there paralyzed by the drugs with tears streaming down my face. I wanted to scream. I prayed for the strength to free myself, but God didn't answer. The creature turned to me and tilted its head to the side, blinking its huge yellow eyes. I don't remember seeing it move, but suddenly it was taking a bite from my left shoulder. I could hear my collarbone snap like a twig, but I felt no pain. I watched in a horror as it devoured my flesh, then came in for a second bite. I closed my eyes and held my breath, waiting for this nightmare to be over, when loud booms echoed from the darkness and panicked screams filled the air. My eyes sprung open in time to see the creature's head explode, its body slumping to the ground as two men wearing body armor came rushing in. As the lights came on and the room slowly went back to normal, my body convulsed. Bile rushed up my throat and I puked as a surge of mind-numbing, unbelievable pain exploded in my body. Then I passed out. I woke up screaming, still seeing those horrible yellow eyes in the darkness. A woman I didn't recognize rushed into the room. I instantly panicked and flailed around till I fell out of the bed. When I hit the floor, I tried to plant my left hand and push myself up, but there was nothing there. My left arm was gone. A wave of disbelief and confusion washed over me as I scooted away from the strange woman who was trying to calm me down. "Sam, relax, we're trying to help you. No one here is going to hurt you." I didn't believe her, I yelled. "Let me out! Let me out of here now!" She backed towards the door, nodding and holding out her hands. "You're free to leave whenever you like. We're not holding you here. We had to replace your clothes. There's something for you to wear in the closet," she said, pointing towards the closet door on the other side of the room. "I'm going to leave you now so you can get dressed and go. There's pain meds and antibiotics in the dresser drawer. You're going to need them. Be sure to keep that wound clean. An infection will fuck you up. You'll probably die. Good luck, Sam." With that, she turned and walked out. I sat there for a few seconds after the door closed. I hadn't paid attention to the room since I woke up. Looking around, I realized this wasn't a hospital. It was pretty much a typical bedroom with a restroom attached. I got up from the floor and went to the window, and what I saw shocked me. I was in a regular neighborhood, and a fairly nice one at that. To be honest, I felt a little cheated. In the movies, people always wake up in the most amazing places, and here I was in Plainsville, USA. I shook it off and got dressed and walked out. Just like she said, no one tried to stop me. Matter of fact, no one so much as spoke to me until I got outside. That's where I met Arthur Hicks. He was standing on the front porch in one of those collapsible beach chairs drinking a beer. The second I stepped out, he looked at me and chuckled, nodding his head as he reached down and picked up another beer and tried to hand it to me. I ignored it and walked right past him and headed for the street. I was halfway down the driveway when he yelled out, "They're looking for you, Sam." I kept walking. It's been 3 months since all this happened, and I'm not telling you all this just to reflect on my strange, fucked up life. I'm telling you this because last night when I got home from therapy, there was a 2-foot-tall stone statue of a great horned owl next to my front door. Trail's End, Chapter 2. It's been nearly 4 months since the Trail's End incident. I lost my job, my girlfriend, and my left arm. To top it off, a few nights ago when I got home from therapy, there was an owl statue next to my front door. It's one of those little details I didn't pay much attention to at first, but seeing it again brought it all back. Every home in Trail's End had this exact totem either in the yard or near the door. This was them, it had to be. I rushed inside thinking I was going to grab what I could and take off, but the second I got inside, my jaw dropped. Everything I owned was gone. My apartment was stripped down to the walls. It looked like I had never lived there. I walked around in shock for a few minutes before I dug my phone out of my pocket and tried calling the police. There was no signal. My heart dropped and I turned to bolt out of the apartment, but standing just outside the door was the security guard from Trail's End. "Good seeing you again." I glanced down just in time to see he was aiming something at me. There was a loud pop from the taser in his right hand. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, then 50,000 volts sent me straight to the floor, pissing myself. The old bastard stepped in, closing the door behind him, then started laughing. "Have you been, Sam?" He pulled the trigger again, sending another surge of electricity pulsing through me. The old man rushed over and dropped a knee in my chest, pinning me to the floor. He pulled a syringe from his pocket while muttering something under his breath. "I wanted to kill you," before sinking the needle in my neck. The room started spinning and an all too familiar warm sensation rolled through me. I could hear him talking, but his words were distorted. My vision blurred and my tongue went numb as everything faded to black. I'm not sure how long I was out, but when I opened my eyes, I was in the trunk of a car. It took me a second to shake the fog from my brain and focus, but the second my vision cleared, I spotted the trunk release and pulled it. The instant the trunk popped open, the old man noticed. He smashed down on the gas and we picked up speed. I looked around trying to get a sense of where I was, and the second I saw the highway sign, I jumped. Slamming into the concrete hurt like hell. I rolled and tumbled for a few seconds before slamming into the guardrail and nearly blacking out. I struggled on my feet and tried to run, but between the drugs and the fall, I wasn't doing all that well. I staggered along the highway, slowly picking up speed till I spotted some lights in the distance. A gas station. I climbed over the guardrail and crossed the field, coming out behind the building. Moving as fast as I could, I made my way through the entrance just as the old man came speeding into the parking lot. "Call the police. There's someone trying to..." Before I could finish yelling, a shotgun blast shattered the window behind me. I tried to duck and run, but fell flat on my face as more shots tore through the store. Crawling through the broken glass, I scrambled to take cover behind a donut display case. The shots kept coming for a few seconds, then the chimes above the door sounded and everything got quiet. I never got a good look at the clerk, but judging by the screams, she must have been terrified. I could hear the glass crunching under his feet as he slowly moved through the store. I glanced over towards the counter just in time to see the clerk pop her head up and sneak a peek. The old man didn't hesitate. The blast from the shotgun turned her head inside out, splattering on the cigarette case. He was so close I could hear him breathing. I sat there listening as he walked over to the display case I was hiding behind, opened it and grabbed himself a donut. He took a bite and started talking as he chewed. "Look what you made me do, Sam. No one was supposed to get hurt." He swallowed his mouthful and chuckled. "Damn, that's a good donut. Come on now, Sam. I'm running out of patience. We got places to be and people to see. Get your sorry ass up and let's go." He took another bite, then stepped around the display case and looked directly at me. "I said, let's go." I got up off the floor. The old man kept his eyes locked on me with an odd little smirk on his face. "I gotta hand it to you, Sam. I didn't think you'd jump. You have to be the dumbest son of a bitch I've ever seen, but you got guts, I'll give you that. Now move." This time, instead of putting me in the trunk, he directed me to the passenger seat, then zip-tied my right wrist to my right ankle, leaving me in a very uncomfortable position. The trip was painfully silent. When we finally pulled up to the gate, my heart dropped. I started having flashbacks of that thing tearing into me and I panicked. "Let me go. Why are you doing this?" The old man looked over at me, then smacked me, bouncing my head off the dash. "Shut that shit up. It's too late to start crying now. We're here." It wasn't long before I heard the crunching of gravel as we got closer to House 72. By the way I was positioned, I couldn't see much, but when the car finally came to a stop, I heard a familiar voice. "Welcome back, Mr. Bryce. I see you've caught up to our old friend, Sam. I was starting to think you were getting slow in your old age." I didn't have to see him to know who it was. The sound of his voice made me sick to my stomach. It was the old man. Their voices faded away as they walked off. After a few seconds, two men wearing hooded gray robes pulled me out of the car. One of them slipped a bag over my head, then clipped the zip tie before I was taken inside. When the bag finally came off, I was standing in a concrete room with no windows. The smell of feces and rotted meat were heavy in the air, and I could hear screaming. A small slot on the door slid open behind me. That little stunt your friends pulled cost us time and money, Mr. Walters. Where are they? I almost laughed. How would I know? What's your problem? Why are you people doing this to me? The slot slid shut and a low hissing sound filled the room. I turned around to see a yellow mist flowing from an air vent in the corner. The smell was sweet and thick. I halfway expected to pass out, but instead the room around me slowly dissolved, and suddenly I was standing in the middle of a forest. Where are they? The voice boomed so loud it rattled my brain. Something slammed into me from behind me, knocking me down, and as I tried to get to my feet, I was blindsided again. Where are they? I heard footsteps rushing behind me. I tried rolling to my left to avoid whatever had been attacking me, but it was too late. Something grabbed me by the ankles and lifted me into the air. When I saw it for the first time, I screamed. It was hideous. Its oversized head was a bloody scabbed over mess that pulsed, as if something was crawling just beneath the skin. It had one huge yellow eye. Where the other should have been was an empty socket that oozed like a river of writhing maggots and pus. Its mouth, or at least what was left of it, was partially decaying beak. This was the creature. Its body looked malnourished. Its once heavily muscled frame was now withering. Its slick gray skin was dried and cracked all over, but this was it. The creature let out a bone-rattling screech, then slammed me to the ground, knocking me unconscious. When I came to, I was in a horribly familiar room, strapped to a chair. The thick leather straps were so tight I could barely breathe. As I opened my eyes, I saw Bryce sitting in a chair across the room. "Today's your lucky day, Sam. Mr. Gilroy wants you alive." He got up from his chair and retrieved a pair of pliers and a container of salt from the small table. "I'm going to ask you nicely one last time. Where are they, Sam?" Bryce walked over and knelt down in front of me, taking a hold of my foot and removing my shoe, before gripping the nail of my big toe with the pliers. "Still not talking?" he smiled. "Good." He tore away my toenail, then poured salt on my toe and stood back watching me scream. "Where are they?" I told him I didn't know, and either he didn't believe me or he didn't care. One by one, he tore off all of my toenails and salted every wound. The pain was incredible. I told him everything I could remember, but it still wasn't enough. Eventually, Gilroy walked in. "That's enough for now, Mr. Bryce. I'll take it from here. Hello, Sam. It's been a while." Gilroy strolled across the room, removing his jacket and rolling up his sleeves. "I don't know where they are. Just please let me go." He looked at me and smiled. "Oh, Mr. Walters, you know I can't do that. But I have a special treat for you." He raised his hand in the air and I heard the door creak open behind me. A few seconds later, a woman strapped to a wheelchair was brought in with a bag on her head. Gilroy positioned the woman in front of me and removed the bag. It was my sister, Francine. Her mouth was taped shut, but it was the look of fear in her eyes that broke me. "I'll do anything you want, just let her go." Gilroy ran his fingers through her hair and smirked at me before raising his hand again. "Take Mr. Walters to the Great Hall, then prepare the woman for the ritual." More men in hooded robes entered the room. The second I was unstrapped, I lunged at the old man, only to get clubbed across the head and drug out. I woke up strapped to a chair in a huge room. On either side of me were two others. A woman to my right and a young boy to my left. In front of us was an altar being held up by 4 owl statues. After a few minutes, people wearing hooded robes filed in and stood on either side of the room. The lights dimmed and Gilroy's voice echoed through the room. "Tonight we witness the rebirth of our Lord Moloch. The blood of his transgressors will flow and this world will kneel to his power. Bring forward the vessel." Francine was brought in by 2 other women and stood at the foot of the altar. She was clearly under the influence of whatever drug they had pumped into her. The other woman removed her clothes and laid her on the altar as the hooded figures began chanting. A short while later, Gilroy himself entered the room wearing a feathered headdress and a dark gray robe trimmed in gold. He slowly approached the altar, and as he got closer, he raised his hands. The room went silent. He walked around the altar, stopping at Francine's head, and produced what looked like a small egg, then placed it in her mouth and forced her to swallow it. He raised his hands once again, and the chanting restarted, as his robes were removed by the two women standing near the altar. I struggled against the straps, yelling as loud as I could, "Don't touch her! Get away from her, you piece of shit!" I swear the old bastard grinned at me as someone stepped up behind me and stuck a needle in my neck. I was paralyzed by whatever cocktail they had just pumped into me, forced to watch Gilroy mount Francine and grind away until the deed was done. Gilroy climbed down from the altar and was handed a large dagger as he moved towards Francine. He raised the blade above his head as his voice boomed through the room. "From darkness comes light. From death comes life." Then he slit her throat. She gurgled and gasped before going still. Then her stomach started to swell. It stretched and distorted until the skin was so thin, it tore, splattering blood everywhere. A bubbling black mass slowly emerged from my sister's mangled corpse and oozed out, spilling to the floor. Gilroy's voice cut through the room. "Bring me the boy." The child seated next to me was unstrapped from his chair and taken to the altar. The old man grabbed him and forced him to kneel in the pool of thick, black liquid. The child screamed as the mass quickly engulfed his body, shattering his bones and dissolving his flesh. The chanting got louder as the world around me seemed to vibrate and crackle with energy. The ooze started to smoke, casting clouds of yellow mist into the air. My lungs filled with a sickly sweet stench of gas. The chanting drifted into the distance, becoming white noise as a large hand grew from the center of the bubbling mass. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear my own eyes out so I wouldn't have to see what was next, but there was no escaping it. The creature slowly emerged from the mass, screeching as its horrible face took shape. Its large yellow eyes formed and focused on the woman who was now being guided to the altar. Its beak, which was still taking shape, sliced through her flesh and devastated her collarbone as it took its first bite. The remains of her left arm dangled from a shredded flap of flesh for just a second before falling to the floor. She didn't even scream. She dropped to her knees, staring at the creature as it swallowed its first mouthful. By the time it was finished with her, there wasn't much left. I felt the straps of my chair release. The drugs must have worn off a little. The muscle in my legs twitched. This was it. It was now or never. I let the woman lift me to my feet and start towards the altar. The one on my right was between me and the creature. The second I felt the material of her robe, I shoved her towards that thing and made a break for it. I knew the gas that was coming from the creature would have most, if not all, of the hooded figures under its spell. I heard her scream and a loud wet crunch as I turned to run. The other woman tried to grab me, but it was too late. I sprinted through the room, plowing through the huge double doors and out into the hallway. I could still hear that woman screaming as I ran, searching for anything that looked like a way out. I eventually found a control room filled with security monitors. People were scrambling all over the compound. I didn't have much time. Up against the far wall was a gun safe that was standing open. With one arm, a shotgun wouldn't do me much good, but luckily for me, there were several pistols. I grabbed one, making sure it was loaded, then took a couple of extra magazines and put them in my pockets, before smashing the monitors and getting out of there. The second I was back in the hall, I saw people headed my way. I fired blindly down the hall. I know for a fact I hit one of them because I saw him drop as the others dove for cover. After a few minutes, I finally found my way outside. There was no way I was getting out of Trail's End on foot, but there was no time to come up with a better idea. I was about halfway through that 2-mile stretch of dirt road when headlights came roaring up behind me. I turned and let off 3 shots, hoping to hit the driver, then dove out of the way as the car rolled past me and hit a tree. I got up and ran to the car as the door popped open and stepped out Bryce. I didn't have time to think. I fired 2 more times and he took off into the swampland that surrounds House 72. The car was still running. I jumped in and slammed the door and hauled ass out of there as gunshots peppered the rear of the car. In no time, I was speeding through the neighborhood headed for the main gate. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. I gunned the engine as the gates came into view and smashed through them headed for the highway. Trail's End, Chapter 3. I've been living on the streets for weeks now. With no money and nowhere to go, I've been laying low, praying I can make it through each night without seeing her face when I close my eyes. It never works. Another sleepless night. As the sun came up, I sat staring out of a broken window, wondering how long it would be before they caught up to me. The sky was clouded over and gray. Great. Looks like rain. I walked to my usual stop, the donut shop a few blocks away. They toss out a bag of leftovers every morning. Normally if I get there first, I take my pick and split the rest with whoever's around, but this morning no one was there. I picked up the bag and waited for a while, but when the rain started, I got moving. After a block or two, I heard someone call my name. "Hey, Sam!" I dropped the bag and pulled my pistol as I took cover behind a parked car. The man stopped and put his hands up, then called to me. "Sam, it's me, Hicks. I've been looking everywhere for you. Put the gun down, brother. I'm here to help." I squinted my eyes to get a good look at him as he pulled his hoodie back, showing me his face. It was the beer guy from the front porch. I put the gun away and picked my bag up as he came jogging over. "We can keep you safe, Sam. Sooner or later, Gilroy's people are going to find you. You can't run forever." As much as I hated to admit it, he was right. Sooner or later, they would find me, and even with the gun, they would eventually take me. Why can't you people just leave me alone? What the fuck did I do to deserve any of this? Hicks looked around, making sure we weren't being watched. "There's a lot to explain. I'll tell you everything you want to know, but can we please get out of the goddamn rain? I'm getting soaked out here." We went back to the abandoned factory I'd been living in, and he broke it down for me. When I missed my first delivery date, it brought Hicks and his people enough time to smuggle one of Gilroy's prisoners out of the compound. When I showed up the second time, he chose me as a replacement because they needed an outsider for the sacrifice, and I happened to be there. Hicks and his people had been hunting Gilroy for years, and had managed to infiltrate the cult posing as members. On the night of the first ritual, they were supposed to assassinate him, but he managed to get away during the commotion, and that's when they ended up rescuing me. Anton Gilroy is the leader of a cult Hicks refers to as the Grey. They don't have an official name, but from what he tells me, these guys are spread all over the United States. Hicks won't tell me who he works for, but he assures me they can and will help me start my life over when all of this is done. I didn't want to start my life over. I wanted to kill Gilroy, and when I told him that, Hicks smiled. "Listen to me, Sam. Once you're in, there's no going back. These people will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Are you sure this is what you want?" I thought about it for a second, and when I told him I was sure, he made a call. A few minutes later, a car came to pick us up. The second the door closed, the driver let down the window. "Holy shit, you smell bad. Jesus, Hicks, are you sure this is the right guy?" Hicks laughed. "Shut up, Ozzy. We're taking him to the safe house to get him cleaned up, and yeah, he's the right guy." We drove to some apartments on the east side of town, and they set me up with a place to stay. Over the next few days, they laid out the plan. I was going to be bait. When Gilroy's people came to get me, they would ambush them and use them to get back inside the compound. Once we were inside, we'd kill everyone and burn the place to the ground. The second we hit House 72, the others would storm the surrounding neighborhood and make sure there was no one left to stop us on the way out. I kept thinking about how big Trail's End actually was. The body count was going to be huge. Was I trading one act of evil for another? Sure, what Gilroy was doing was horrible, but this was mass murder. Did all of those people deserve to die for following the wrong person? And what about that creature? How the hell are we supposed to stop that thing? I had a million questions and couldn't get one straight answer. A part of me wanted to walk away, but the flashbacks of Francine changed my mind. I'd gladly watch the world burn if it meant Gilroy paid for what he'd done. The next few days dragged by slow. Then, one night around 2 a.m., someone kicked in the door and tried to take me away. Hicks and his people were there in a flash. The whole thing was over in a matter of minutes, and just like that, the plan was in motion. Before I knew it, we were rolling towards Trail's End. Once we were through the gates and headed for House 72, my heart started racing when we pulled onto the dirt road. Hicks told the driver to stop the car and let down the window. Once the window was down, he put a silenced 9mm in the guy's ear and blew his brains out into the darkness. After that, he pushed the body out of the car and got behind the wheel. He glanced over at me and smiled. "Lock and load, Sam, it's showtime." He got on his radio and sent the word. As the house came into view, I could see Bryce standing in the driveway. He held up his fist and Hicks stopped the car and then flashed the lights 2 times, and he waved us in. Ozzy was in the trunk with the heavy artillery. As we pulled up, the smile slowly vanished from Bryce's face when he saw Hicks. Before he could reach for his gun, I pulled my own and aimed at him. "Don't move." Hicks popped the trunk and let Ozzy out, then stepped over to Bryce and took his weapon before opening my door so I could get out without taking my aim off Bryce. I looked him in the eyes and smiled before bashing him in the face with a pistol and dropping him to the ground. I took aim and was just about to pull the trigger when Hicks stopped me. "We have to keep it quiet till we get inside." He pulled a knife from his belt and held it out. "Make it quick." I put the gun away and took the blade before kicking Bryce one last time, knocking him unconscious. I stood over him for a second, then leaning close and drove the knife into his neck, twisting the blade to open a gaping hole. We moved inside quickly, eliminating the few guards that were there. Something felt wrong. This place is normally crawling with security, but for some reason the compound was quiet. We moved through the halls, checking rooms, all empty. There was a faint odor of blood hanging in the air that only got stronger as we got deeper into the building. And when we got to the lower levels, we found out why. The halls were cracked with blood and chunks of shredded flesh. I started thinking maybe the creature had wiped them all out and we were too late. We searched for a while longer until we came to the huge set of double doors leading to the altar room. That horrible sweet smell crept through the coppery funk of the hallway. And before we could open the doors, the lights flickered, then Gilroy's voice reverberated through the corridors. "I am your god. Kneel before me or perish in the flames of your fallen world." I looked over to see Hicks removing a handful of what looked like ball bearings from his pack. "What are those?" He looked back at me and grinned. "You'll see." He motioned to Ozzy, who cracked the doors open and threw them into the altar room. Hicks counted to 3, then we all rushed in. The room was littered with body parts and coated in blood. Gilroy was standing on the altar, biting the fingers off of a severed arm when we charged in. The second I laid eyes on him, I pulled my pistol and fired as Hicks yelled, "Wait!" But it was too late. My shot struck him in the center of the chest, knocking him off the altar. Ozzy rushed over to the body, but before he could get close to Gilroy, he was back on his feet. His flesh was bubbling and turning gray. His eyes glowed bright yellow. Ozzy opened fire, moving inhumanly fast. The old man bolted across the room and tackled him. Hicks fired a few shots, then yelled, "Fall back, we have to get him in the center of the room." Ozzy screamed, "Help me!" There was a large crunch and his voice was gone. The old man seemed to have doubled in size. He leapt towards us as he reached the center of the room. 5 beams of red light froze him in place. Hicks put his gun away and stepped back into the room. I looked to see the beams were coming from those things he had tossed in earlier. He laughed and walked over to Gilroy, who was frozen, suspended in the air. "Did you really think the master would let you have free reign? You should have stayed in your lane, old man. You had your chance and failed. This is our world now, and you have no place in it." I slowly backed away. I wasn't sure what the hell was going on, but I knew I had to get out of there. As soon as I turned to run, I heard a loud bang and my right leg was knocked from under me, sending me crashing to the floor. "Not so fast there, Sammy boy," Hicks called out. "Where do you think you're going?" I tried to pull my gun, but Hicks must have been faster than I gave him credit for. He smacked the pistol out of my hand, then grabbed me by the collar and dragged me back into the altar room. "You stay put. I'll get to you in just a second." He turned and stepped back over to Gilroy. Before the sun rises, all of your children will be dead, and you'll be sent back to the pit to fight for scraps with the other old ones. Hicks pulled the knife from his belt and plunged it into the old man's chest. After a few moments of hacking, he dropped the blade and removed his heart using his bare hands. He tossed it on the floor and Gilroy's body burst into flames, reducing him to a bubbling black sludge spattering onto the floor. Hicks turned in my direction, his eyes glowing bright red as he towered over me. "Well, Sam, looks like the party's over." I looked up at him. "Who are you?" He smiled as he raised his foot. "We are Legion." He brought his foot back down onto my head, and the last thing I heard was the sound of my skull cracking before everything went black. Breaking news. This is Casey Monroe, WTF News, coming to you live from Trails End Private Living Community, the scene of what's being called the worst fire in state history. According to first responders, the fire could be seen from miles away. In the last several hours, multiple bodies have been removed from the scene. Going by the state registry, there were 150 residents of this private community, and at this point, no one has been found alive. Investigators say there are clear signs of arson. Details are being withheld until the scene has been cleared out, but it's safe to say it seems foul play was involved. We'll keep you informed as more details come in. This is Casey Monroe, WTF News, signing off.